The Louisiana Restaurant Association presents Conversations in the COVID Crisis, a special edition podcast to capture the stories of our industry during the most unprecedented of times. Now, here are your hosts, LRA President and CEO Stan Harris and Vice President of Communications, Wendy Warren.
You're here with Wendy and Stan, and it is a week of content coming your way, not only on the podcast, but through your email in your snapshots. So y'all be paying attention to that. We have some action items for you in your self-isolation or your monitored situation. In any case, Stan, how are you doing today?
Doing well. It's good to start the week off fresh, and hopefully we're a few days closer to being able to open our industry back up.
Amen. Goodness gracious. So we spent the weekend getting ready for a big push, and bright and early this morning we got a package of information from the National Restaurant Association. Do you want to give me a kind of an overview of what we saw this morning?
Sure. It was an abundance of information. First was the guidelines that we're using as our industry blueprint for recovery. That's to come up with the Restaurant and Food Service Industry Recovery Fund, where we're asking Congress to come up with $240 billion. We want to get them to replenish the funding and fix the structural issues of the payroll protection program that we'd already outlined to them. Creating a healthy restaurants tax credit or grant program to support restaurants modify their physical facilities to accommodate continued social distancing, enhanced sanitation, and employee education. And also, we're required to expand the use of personal protective equipment and other disposable products.
Right.
Provide federal relief for employers' share of unemployment insurance. Enact the SNAP COVID-19 Anti-Hunger Restaurant Relief for You Act of 2020 that would, in effect, allow restaurant meals to be served to SNAP participants during the crisis. And then increase funding for the Economic Injury Disaster Loans, the EIDLs, that were funded, and it also ran through. They're requesting $50 billion of funding there.
So we have a lot. We have a lot of ask in play right now, and this is where our membership has been very cooperative with us on the survey, and we're using those survey results from the second survey results to kind of illustrate the need in those areas. And those, you saw those early on Friday, and you told me that they were pretty dire. You've had those numbers for 3 days now. What have you marinated on? You know, those.
Well, I think when you look at 81% of restaurants have either laid off or furloughed employees, that's a dramatic number. That means only 19% of operators haven't. And 13% anticipate laying off more in the next 30 days. So that's a challenge. We've had 115,000 total restaurant employees in Louisiana laid off or furloughed. That's 65% of our workforce. So if 81% are doing it and 65% is being reported, there's some lag in there that's going to catch up.
Right.
But when you see that restaurant operators reported a 73% decline in sales for the first 10 days of April, that's dramatic.
Wow. And
these are the kinds of things that we're seeing, the proportionality of what happens on the mortality of restaurants and which ones don't recover. I still think we're in that phase where people are thinking positively that they'll be able to come through this, especially as we've started to see them get access to the funding from these different programs, whether it's the PPP program, the EIDL program from SBA, or whether it's the LED program here. What we've learned in the last week or so is that in Louisiana, some of the community banks and regional banks weren't focused on the LED lending program as they were trying to get their folks registered and processed for the SBA products that were out there, and now they're pivoting to look at this program. So I think that there's a lot of relief that's out there. Again, it's borrowing money. Some of it has forgiveness. Most of it's at very attractive loan rates, and don't require a lot of other detail in order to be able to qualify.
Now, tell me about these loan rates, because for some reason, I'm not in the borrowing money business and, how much interest I pay and things like that. What exactly, some of the things you were telling me, you were giving me some examples of borrowing a large sum of money for...
Well, when you use a credit card to make a purchase, and you're using, let's just say, your Visa card or MasterCard to make a purchase, and you decide that you're going to buy a bedroom set for $5,000, and you're not going to pay it off in a month. You're going to pay it off over 5 months. Well, each month, you're going to accrue interest charges. Typically, those are 18% a year. Some have lower rates, some have higher rates. It's just depending on your credit and the deal that you make with the credit issuer. But let's just say that it's 18%. So you'd be paying 1.5% of interest every month. Under the Payroll Protection Program, these loans carry an interest rate of 0.5% or 0.5%, have a 2-year repayment period. That's like borrowing money for no cost. So where a lot of our members have been focused on the maximizing the forgiveness at some point in the future, I would like them to kind of pivot and look at this and say, this is a great way to borrow money inexpensively, and if I get some forgiveness for this, all the better.
Right.
But we've got so many that are focused on the beginning of saying, what can I use it for, instead of understanding they're going to be making a return, they're going to be documenting what they used for wages and the other forgivable parts of this at some point in the future, but it's certainly not going to be at the beginning.
Right. Yeah. So that's one of the things that, as this, as the money started to flow and the members started to call, those were the things in the last, week that we really were being asked a lot. So thank you for clarifying that for the...
Well, even the EIDL loans, the Economic Injury Disaster loans, had a interest rate of 3.375%. That's still very low. I mean, historically, people are borrowing money for mortgages sub 5% right now. That's historically cheap. I remember the first house that I purchased, my interest rate was 16%. And car rates for borrowing money from banks used to be 12 to 15%. People are now attracted to 0% interest, 0.5%, 1%, 2%. And
that's when you refinance your house.
on the liquidity that they get.
Right. Yeah, definitely. That's when you get those 2 and 3%. That's when you refinance your house and do some upgrades.
You bet.
So,
and that's the whole purpose of it. Is that sometimes when the Fed does things to stimulate rate reduction, is to generate more activity in the economy.
Right.
And so we're looking at 3 different programs. PPP, which we talked about, EIDL, which we've touched on, and then the LED Guaranteed Lending Program in Louisiana that's up to $100,000. It's really focused on small business liquidity, and the term of the loan is going to depend on what you can negotiate, but it can be up to 5 years, and it's a very favorable interest rate of 4% or less. So building that type of liquidity for your business to help you address the impact of this over a longer period of time.
Right.
We know that we're not going to flip a switch and say whether that date is May 1st or June 1st, and business come back to what it was on March 1st. We just know that's not going to be the case. So these lending programs and recovery programs provide mitigation for your losses and help you sustain yourself until you can get back to a more normal operation, or what the new normal looks like, and also help you cover some of the operating losses that you may have in the interim until you ramp back up to what your new business model looks like.
Yeah, the runway. You said that the other day, and our runway, like our lead time into what this looks like. Everybody's, kind of thinking, what is that? Is that next month? Is that June 1st? Is it July 1st? Like, what's everybody's anxious to get back to to?
Well, I think what we look at sometimes is our bias is generated by our own experiences in life. And most of our bias in Louisiana is wrapped around weather issues. We probably had the aberrant BP oil spill, but most of it's weather issues. Mm-hmm. And when those are over, you generally have this pent-up demand, but you also have people that say, let's go back to Louisiana. They're struggling right now. Let's go help them after what they've been through.
Right.
Well, unfortunately, that's happening in every one of our neighbor states, too. This is a hurricane that hit all 50 states. And we're sitting here saying, oh, my goodness, how do we help recover? How do we help get everyone back to normal as quickly as possible? And it's going to be different because we've got reduced demand. We've got reduced corporate and non-essential business travel. We've got the cruise lines that are shut down with 3 ships sitting in the port of New Orleans right now. We've got reduced capacity and demand for trade shows and large events like the festivals and things that have already been canceled. It remains to be seen what college athletics looks like, college events, what professional sporting events look like. I think that all of those are going to weigh in as to how they can continue to stay connected with their customer base, but at the same time, keep social distancing, keep good health practices and things like that in front of mind.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing your insight and your because you were in the business, it makes all the difference in how we understand this and go through this process. I am a firm believer of that. So,
well, it's what we do as an association, and it's what we do for our industry as their advocate. What we want them to do is help them make the best informed decision for their business. We can provide guidance to them. We try to provide specificity where we have it. But in a lot of cases, what you have to do is make the best informed decision and move forward with that decision. And as things occur and pivots occur during that time, adapt to what's going on with that. Instead of looking in the rearview mirror, look at to where you're going, because that's going to help you recover. It's going to help you bring your workforce back, and it's going to help you reconnect with your guests, which is the most important thing any of our restaurants can do.
Yes, indeed. Well, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Next on the podcast is Chef Tori McPhail of Commander's Palace. I go by Commander's Palace to and from work every day, and the last time I saw Chef was on the street. I was driving by and I honked the horn, and that was on March 17th. The first official day that we were closed as an industry. Do you want to tell me about what was going on that day for you, if you remember?
Aside from just a rush of emotion and adrenaline, it was just a matter of saying, all right, so we're not going to be dining in the restaurants and all that any further. Now we just need to be able to pivot our industry and try to work on delivery and kind of takeout. So.
And what did that
mobilized our staff, and then we started getting meals out to all of the New Orleans area.
And what kind of meals? I mean, I know we were looking at the lacquered quail in a to-go container, which was really startling to me.
That's it. But we just kept on getting this response. Even in the days after that, they're just like, man, I know it doesn't quite look the same. The delivery mechanism is way different than what you'd expect when you typically come to Commander's Palace. But we're just so happy to be able to have your brand of food. We sit down, and some people, we have all these hats with these funny bands that say, celebrate at Commander's Palace, and they're signed, and, monogram menus and all those things, and they would lay that stuff out. They would even, set their table with a white tablecloth and have an aqua blue ribbon across the top, which typically signifies a VIP person for us. And they would get the Commander's food, they would put it in the oven, they put it in the microwave, they put it on their china, and they'd sit down and have their Friday night meal. And
that's awesome.
we just get so many kind messages back on my telephone or through the sites and all, and say, hey man, thank you for what you're doing for the neighborhood. You're putting smiles on people's faces, and we thank you for that.
And how long did that last?
But I guess that was going for 7 days.
7 days. And then
right.
and what happened then? It just became...
And then we just got to the point where we're just like, look, man, what are we doing? We're trying to do good by the community, but now we're putting our employees at risk, by trying to do curbside pickup. I'm just like, as a community, you do what you can until you feel like it's not right anymore. And we just got to that point with our employees. And so we still had the Rouse's campaign going. And that very similarly was, putting smiles on people's faces. And, if that means me keeping one or two sous chefs still on the payroll to try to help me do what we need to do while we're scrubbing walk-ins and repainting and sanding and pressure washing, then that's what we need to do. But even like the next chapter in that is we're saying to ourselves again, as this thing gets more and more out of control, again, we are putting our employees in harm's way, and that's just not a good thing for us, for them, or for the community. So we decided to stop that as well.
Okay. So no more turtle soup at Rouse's?
No, but we're going to start up again. I was actually on the telephone with those guys yesterday, and they said, hey, man, as soon as you're ready to get back going again, we'd love to be able to have your product. It's just such a pleasure to see you walk into the store in a starched white chef's jacket. It's like a sign of normalcy or something.
Yeah. You're like the jazz band that used to play on special occasions.
Yeah. I'm a single second line of one.
So, and tell me what's going on over at Picnic Provisions and Whiskey.
Yeah, so that restaurant is sitting idle at the moment, and we have some cleaning projects, of course, but it's a tiny little space, and it's only like 1,350 square feet. Yeah. And so we touch base with the team all the time, but hopefully this week we'll have some more opportunities to kind of reassess what's happening. And when it makes sense for us to start our delivery program again, then we're able to do that. Yeah.
So tell me about this project. Your wife is on social media talking about it all the time. I see it more from her than I do from you. So It's called Sofa King Fest. How did this come about? And what is it?
So my dear friend Nikki Gilbert, she now lives in Los Angeles, but she is great, man. She knows me really well, and she knows that I get very inspired by amazing live music. To see a group of performers on stage, it's a very naked thing. If somebody misses a note, everybody recognizes it. Mm-hmm. It's very similar to what we have going on in the kitchen. If you get a soup or if you get an entree and the thing is perfectly balanced and everybody's having fun and you walk through the kitchen and having people smiles on their faces, you're just thinking to yourself, man, these guys are great. It's like tight and in sync and everybody feels it. Well, it's the same thing with local live music. And so she says, look, Tori, I'm starting this thing called Sofa King. Would you mind jumping on at prime time? I think it was on a Friday last week, a week ago, something like that. Jumping on and playing kind of between the sets. And so I'm looking at the lineup. Melissa Etheridge is playing earlier in the day. Mark Broussard from right here from Louisiana, he's playing, a couple right after me. So I'm just like, man, little old me has the opportunity to do some cool food, flambe a bunch of stuff, man. We're drinking rum. Some goes in the pan. We're barbecuing, jerk smoked chicken with, brown sugar, roasted pineapples. It was a blast. We had a great time.
So what is it? There's a fundraising element to this.
Yeah, that's it. So if you go to sofakingfest.com, it's sofa-king-fest.com. You'll kind of get the rundown of exactly what's happening per day. So that day last week, that was Louisiana Day. So they try to have as many Louisiana-based folks as you possibly could. Mm-hmm. So you look at the lineup, and then if you just look just to the right, there is a tab there, and it is that person's charity or fundraising section of choice. Mm-hmm. And so, you can click on that. I was trying to raise money for the Commander's Palace Employee Relief Fund, which all that money goes directly back to our employees that are impacted by all this. But also, what's been really amazing is understand Dev and the team from New Orleans Red Bean Foundation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, again, these guys have partnered up with chefs and musicians, and so the chefs make the food. They deliver it to front lines of all the hospitals, but then the musicians actually drop it off. So again, it's musicians and great chefs working together to feed the folks on the front line, take care of the community, and then keep us going through all this hardship. So it's an amazing organization. Those folks
they're doing a wonderful.
Commended.
Yeah. That's one of the things we were talking about. Stan and I were talking about. It's like the folks that are on the front line are the only people that the sick patients are interacting with, and that it must be terribly emotionally draining. And for them to have a hot restaurant meal. Somebody thinking about them and their time of need, because it's not just they're working, but it's got to be very emotionally draining. So I appreciate you being part of that and raising awareness for the Red Bean crew, because they are doing outstanding work with our restaurant community to serve those on the front line. So anything else you want to tell your fellow LRA members right now?
This is just a time for all of us to communicate almost more than we possibly can. Get up with each other and say, hey, look, what can I do? How can I help? What's happening? We all just need to band together now more than ever. And some very special things are going to come out of this. We are going to get through this, but this is going to be kind of a rebirth for New Orleans, rebirth for the world. And, let's just put our smart brains together and say, look, how are we going to make Louisiana food better than it ever has been? How are we going to welcome people back into our establishments and provide more smiles and more enjoyment, more so than we ever have been. So, it's there's no other place I'd rather live. This is home. This will always be my home, and I'm just proud to be working side by side with such hard-working people.
Agree. Thank you so much for your time.
I'll see you.
See you soon, babe. Next on the podcast is Randy Daniel, owner of OMW Restaurant Holdings, operator of La Pizzeria in Lafayette. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Wendy. How are you?
I have moved to another corner of my house. So if you hear a dog bark in the background, that's my new coworker. So tell me a little bit about what's going on over in your world, because right as we were starting to go into Mardi Gras, you were opening a new restaurant.
Correct. OMW Restaurant Holdings bought La Pizzeria. We on February the 5th, we closed down for renovations and reopened on the 17th of February to get ready to go for the year, and things took a sudden turn.
Now, you weren't totally off guard. Talk to me about your awareness of COVID-19 when all this was transpiring in your life and you were talking about opening a new restaurant. You were renovating.
So I had three points that kind of set off to me. I remember we were doing the remodel and I was watching the news with my manager, and I looked at her and I said, if this thing comes to the United States, it's really going to shut things down. And she kind of just rolled her eyes at me and told me I was being paranoid. And then when we were in D.C. for the Public Affairs Conference for the LRA, it got very real, and being in the airports and seeing stuff and the conversations that we were having. And we were meeting with our congressional members. They were getting called out to emergency meetings, and so it really hit home. And then when I got back to Lafayette, I got a phone call about a couple days before the governor shut the state down, and it was my sister who runs a PR firm for restaurants in California, and they were about a week ahead of us, and she's kind of warned me that this is going to come, it's going to come hard, and it's going to shut your business down completely.
Yeah, and you kind of had a little head start on a lot of folks. Why don't you tell me what you were set up to do and then what you decided to do in the face of what was going to be soon called a pandemic?
Correct. So the weekend before the governor shut down, I believe a Monday night was the last night of regular business, I had met with my managers and said, this is going to come. We need to be prepared for it. So one of the things is we knew that a lot of people were going to be laid off their jobs. So we came up with a family meals plan, and we actually had it rolled out before the governor shut the state down. And it was a value meal that we could sell to go, easy to operate for the short-term staff, or shorter staff, and it allowed us to get out there and take care of our community. The other thing was, being that we were a new restaurant, we didn't have a lot of money in the bank to assist us through a long period of downturn. So we immediately had to lay off about 2/3 of our staff, and we did it that night. I had a one-on-one conversation with every staff member and told them I'd get them back as soon as I could. Mm-hmm. And then we went to a deal where basically it was myself, my managers, and 3 or 4 employees, and we all worked doubles, and we shut down to 5 days a week so that we could run it without those 2 days off, were all the days we had. And I then called all my vendors, and I told them that payroll comes first and they would come second. And by having that conversation with them beforehand, they all understood. And there's some weeks I pay them off in total, and there's some weeks I pay them a fraction of what I owe them. But they've been very understanding and are happy to continue to do business with us.
Yeah. So what, week by week, you've done different things. You started with family meal, but now, just last week, I was kind of jealous. I didn't see it in enough time. You did a virtual dinner party. Can you tell me about that?
So we thought it would be fun to do a virtual wine dinner, give people sitting at home with nothing to do every night, something different to do. So we teamed up with Josh Sellers, and I called a Rouge Creole in Baton Rouge to see if they wanted to do it with us, and they agreed. And so we did roughly, I believe, 36 dinners between the 2 of us that we sold. It was 3 bottles of wine, a full 4-course meal. And then the brand ambassador for Josh Sellers got online with them for 45 minutes and did a virtual wine dinner explaining all the wines, telling all the exciting stories that come with it. And the feedback I got was tremendous. The customers really, really enjoyed it. They got to get them out of their day-to-day, sitting at home doing the same thing every night. And they're actually asking us to do another one. We're looking to do another one next week.
That's so cool. That is really cool. Thank you, Randy, for sharing your story with the LRA members on our podcast, and we wish you the best of luck.
Well, thank you, Wendy.
Next on the podcast is Pam St. Pierre, Vice President of Member Services for the LRA. How you doing today, Pam?
I'm good. How are you, Wendy? Good speaking to you.
Yeah, it's I haven't seen you in real life in a couple weeks now, and we talk on a Zoom meeting on occasion in these current situations. But I think we're both sitting in our home offices. Correct. And
the new temporary normal, right?
Yeah. And I'm sure you might hear a dog barking in the background on my end because they are just tip-tapping, dancing around me all the time now, my new coworkers. So, Pam, we've had to adjust some things in our current situation to serve our members that is a little bit out of the ordinary, coming up with some innovative and creative ideas. Do you want to... it's April, and we usually have our staff crawfish boil, and all of our chapters are having their crawfish boils, but one chapter is determined to do just that. Do you want to tell us about what's going on?
Sure. Actually, our Acadiana chapter, their leader, their chapter president, Randy Daniel, they were scheduled actually to have their monthly meeting at Randall's on April 20th. And in light of the current COVID crisis, they wanted to, his idea was, let's not cancel this. Instead, let's reinvent this to be, let's invite our members to do takeout crawfish with Frank and his team and at Randall's, because they're so supportive of the organization. And then at the same time, Randy suggested also we do a little insert inside the to-go boxes that also talk about the LRA and how right now we're here for everyone more now than ever. And it's just really, really great. And it's our chapter leadership and it's our industry at times like this that pull together and become very creative, but they're so passionate and empathetic toward each other. So this really makes us proud of who we represent.
Can you imagine, like, all of our members, like, in cars, just a line of cars, waiting to get there to go crawfish? I mean, I never would have imagined that if you would have told me that, a month ago. But right now we're kind of doing what we can to, come together for the industry and also, come together for crawfish. I wish we were a little bit closer.
They're actually really good right now. I've had it a few times myself.
Lucky. I have not had any. I am on the hunt right now. So if anybody has any tips, hit me up at communications@LRA.org. So April at the LRA means something else other than how much crawfish makes us crazy. It's also dividend season. And way in the past, we used to get together at our crawfish bowls and everybody'd come together to get their dividend checks. And, in recent years, we've mailed them out to make it more efficient for us. But what's happening right now with dividends?
Well, with dividends, it's like you just said, we used to do a distribution at a chapter meeting, a crawfish boil. But now with us having a team in our member service department of roughly about 14 people, and 6 of those people are outside sales who are touching our members literally every day, we now have shifted to where our team is making personalized phone calls to all of our dividend recipients who have participated in the past in our work comp program, who sold their business, or primarily all of our active members, and are asking them, we're giving them an option, would they like us to mail the check as we ordinarily have, or would they like us to apply that as a credit to their current active policy? And the response has been overwhelming, to where many of them are wanting to apply those to their current policies, but are just so thankful for our staff and our team just connecting and reaching out, and the response has been overwhelming. And so we're happy that we are able to offer this to them to help them during these times.
Yeah, normally, like, dividends is something that they look forward to as like something to, an extra every year. But in this situation, it's going to be a saving grace for a lot of folks to cover their premium amounts in this time and keep their, their workers' comp policies going. And I think that's something that, we're seeing a lot of our supplier community do the same. They're, giving them some extensions on payments, and, you're seeing some landlords that maybe own the building, letting their tenants, their restaurant tenants kind of, have a little bit more leeway as everybody's, going through this, not just us at the LRA and us in the industry. It's literally everybody, every neighbor, every business, boutique, shop. Really, the grocery stores are winning right now, but you got to also think about how those folks are actually exhausted as much as the healthcare workers right now, because they are in such high demand. The next thing I want to kind of cover, and Pam and I have talked about this a lot, is, what we're doing for the industry, not just our membership, but the industry as a whole. And we have very early on, like on the 16th, turned our LRA.org website into a COVID resource page. And there's no paywall. And that was something that our executive committee said, you know what, if we come out on the other side of this and we've done all of this, for the industry, whether they're members or not, they might say, you know what, when I do get back on my feet and I do have a little extra money for, dues, this is something that is really important. Wouldn't you say that, that's kind of the spirit in which we're all acting right now?
Absolutely. And each time, early on when we as an organization rallied together on when this this crisis first started happening and the closures were going to happen, our membership, the leadership has commented continuously about how our resources on our website have been phenomenal, and there are many of our members who have relationships with people in other states, and those other people in other states aren't getting the same information, and they're sharing our information and our site, and it's all about what we're doing together now. It is so important that we're all in this together. It doesn't matter if you're a member or not a member. Everything is about how we're going to help each other lift up one another and how we're going to get through this, and that's the focus. The focus right now is us just being a resource to the whole industry, because no matter what, if you're a member or not a member, we're fighting for our people because it is the greatest industry. You and I know this very passionately as well. We've worked here for a while, and it's an industry that is more giving than any other industry. And so, yes, our website is phenomenal, and I know, as you've stated, it seems it changes every day. So part of the challenge is now it's getting to be too much information, so we're trying our best. When they say, hey, we have information, but I can't find it, it's there, but we're here to help them no matter
navigate
what.
It. Well, and that's something that in the, every week we kind of go through and we, take off what's no longer relevant and kind of shift things around. So, even those of us who visit it 500 times a day still have to pause for a minute and go, wait a minute, where was that again? Thanks, Pam, for joining
You're
us.
welcome.
And,
always a pleasure.
Yeah, if you need us, we're here for you. You can call 504-454-2277 if you have a question, or visit us on social or at LRA.org. All right, dear. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks.
Okay.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the LRA's Conversations in the COVID Crisis. If you have a story idea, email communications@lra.org. Visit www.lra.org for the latest on COVID-19 resources for restaurateurs. And follow us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. Until next time, stay safe, everybody, and remember, we at the LRA are working harder than ever for Louisiana's restaurant industry.